Collective Awakening podcast.
Sharing truth and knowledge in this time of conscious awakening.
With Chris and Stephen. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Collective Awakening podcast. Chris and Stephen here. Absolute pleasure to have our guest for this episode, Dr. Gareth Thomas. And I became aware of Gareth on an episode of Jeremy Ayres' podcast that he has. And I really resonated with so much of the information, and most importantly, found it really relevant to what we are living through and experiencing right now. So I thought, what a wonderful guest to have with us. So welcome, Gareth. It'd be great if you could just let us know a little bit about yourself, first of all, and the work you do, a little bit of an introduction to what you do.
Okay, thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it. The doctor, you see, I'm a dentist by trade and have been for 30 years. But in around 97, I got more interested in meditation, energy work, and what I would call inner development, which took me on a completely sort of different path to my conventional training, and got me interested very much in causation of disease, what is health, and also what is spiritual development, because I think it's a word or a phrase that's used quite a lot, and the actual nuts and bolts of it aren't understood to a deep enough level. So, I mean, I, apart from the dentistry side of things, I run a school, which is Energy Medicine International, which teaches people how to become practitioners in energy work or healing, using a variety of tools, which shape and focus energy, things like crystals, flowers, color, sound. So I'm very much into energy, and very much into what's happening energetically to humanity, yeah, hopefully I'll be able to share some knowledge. Whether people take it on board or not, it's up to them. I don't mind either way. I don't have all the answers. I've just got my own experience, you know. So thank you for having me on. Thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I feel it'd be a great place to start. Actually, is something about your journey. What brought you to this point that you're at now? What experiences have you had that have sort of shaped you and took you on this pathway that you're currently on?
Well, I when I trained as a dentist, I qualified in 91, and I really initially wasn't that interested in general dentistry, so I was more interested in what was termed maxillofacial surgery, which is head and neck surgery. So I started out in that, and I did what would be termed a house job, a senior house officer's job, and then I did some registrar work. But while I was in that, I became increasingly more, I became disheartened, put it that way, by the conventional approach. Mainly because I remember there was a patient who was in their 70s who had a very large cancer operation, who I was wondering why are we operating on somebody of this age? Like I'm not there to work out why and when people leave this plane, but I just thought there must be something deeper going on here. And the patient, she survived the operation, strangely enough, but it was a huge operation, like 12 hours of reconstructive surgery. And that person had a respiratory arrest a couple of days after the operation, and I was there at the crash, initial crash with a colleague. And I found it very traumatic. And I just thought, this I'm not quite sure about this direction, because I would have had to go back and train as a medic, and then done my surgical exams. And I mean, I was good surgically, still am surgically good in what I do, very good. So that direction would have been pretty much a good direction for me at the time. But I just thought, I can't do this. So it was a bit of an awakening, in relation to the name of the podcast. And I just, there must be a different way to health than this, because this person has died at hospital in a traumatic way. Their only relative was not with them. And are we really understanding why do we do these things to people? And is it appropriate always? And are there other ways of dealing with not just disease, but death? And when people pass from this realm to another realm. So I went off and I traveled for a year. I went to Australia and Thailand. In Thailand, I was really fortunate to meet a monk who taught traditional Thai massage, and I learned from him traditional Thai massage and acupressure. But he saw it in me that if I didn't change my way of thinking about health for myself, that I was on a road to illness. So I got into meditation, and not long after I got into the subtle energy side of things, the subtle anatomy, what people would term the auric field, the chakra points, and other energetic systems. And I just thought, I thought when I first got into that, I just thought, why isn't this totally mainstream? This answers so many questions, that I have about health, the causation, where it sits emotionally, mentally, and if you address that. So then it just flew me into, studying how to practice, and then to teach it. And that was, I started teaching this work over 20 years ago. And I was fortunate enough to have a very, very good teacher. And what I mean by that is somebody who was very thorough, grounded, and nothing flowery about them at all. So that's that's where I am now, and I still find it as fascinating as I did when I first started, because it's something that keeps deepening and deepening and deepening the more you go into it.
Yeah, it's very interesting how you found your way through that. I mean, I would like to think that a lot of people in the system of healthcare actually go into it for what we say for the right reasons. And do you find a lot of colleagues, people who you work with over the time, having similar feelings or similar breakthroughs or awakenings, for lack of a better word?
I always take it back to when I started training as a dentist, and I trained at King's College in London, and we did a lot of our training with medics for the first year, so lots of subjects overlap. And I found that if I look back, lots of those people went into it for the altruistic reason of helping people. They were healers of some nature, but by the time they come out the other side, that innate capacity is altered in some way. It's lost in some people, I think, and can be lost. Other practitioners manage to hold that energy somehow and bring it into their practice. But I think deep down, there's many practitioners probably feel like they're not having enough time to help people. They're not allowed to bring their intuition into what they do. That's why lots of people in my profession end up working in the private sector, because there's so much control of time in the National Health Service that people are limited to what they can actually do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had a very interesting, to say the least, say the last 4 years, maybe a little bit more. And it seems like the subject of our health is becoming, whatever way you look at it, unavoidable with
Yeah.
what happened, obviously, with the COVID and such, and having to face things. What has been your thoughts on what's occurred on the earth energetically with people over the last 4 years? We've witnessed a lot of people on the health side now looking more and more at trauma as
Yeah.
well, looking at energy, looking at the health in a different way that this time seems to have brought about.
Um, well, if you look at the whole scenario, um, uh, you've got a situation where a collective number of people have made people think in a certain way, right? So I was thinking, I had a feeling you'd ask me this question, and I was thinking about this, and I didn't want to go down the road of good, bad. I wanted to go down the road of, if we take all the names out of it, what actually happened to humanity within that period? You've got a group of people within the consciousness have driven the thought form into the rest of humanity, or thought forms. Some people have taken that on board, and some people have gone, actually, this does not resonate with me. And they've decided to think in a different way. Now, many people who say, oh, come on, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're this, you're that. And my answer to that would be, is if you've got the majority of the planet, let's say they are altruistic and compassionate and they really care for us, that period is over. So why doesn't their altruism and compassion continue? So why do we still have war? Why do we still have famine? Why do we still have disease? So those people who control the whole globe, if they can do that for that reason, surely it can be used in a positive way for change. And it's all about thought, it's all about consciousness. Huh? And I think that for me, what happened was it showed to me that the medical system, the conventional medical system, is breaking down and it's coming to an end. But for me, it's like a resurgence of what people were trying to do in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where lots of people were trying to bring in more natural ways of looking at health, more energetic ways of looking at health, consciousness. And then the medical system came in and it stopped it.
Yeah.
Now, you can't stop an energy like that. It has to come in. So for me, it's very positive. And I think that what we're seeing is that energy just flooding in. And what's causing that block is being brought to light. And it's quite obvious. I mean, unfortunately, lots of people have been harmed and killed. Unfortunately. And it's quite interesting. We forget that, or not so much forget it, we become so desensitized to violence, to death, to harm. And people go, oh, somebody's died. You go, oh, okay, what? And then if you really think about it, okay, that one person, they had a family, they had friends, those friends had families, and the interconnectedness of everyone. And if you think about all those people who were lost and the amount of grief and suffering, that vibration of suffering and grief is there in humanity. It's another wound that we have to deal with. And it's constantly, you're talking about wounding. Wounds are either personal or they're collective. And it's those collective wounds that hold us down to a vibration where we can't evolve beyond what I would term the lower three centers of materialism, sexuality, and ego. So we kept within those realms constantly, and we never move into what's termed the heart center, the higher creativity, and the higher mind. So it's that vibration is held down vibrationally, so that people don't escape it. It's almost like an energy prison, or prison consciousness.
And the best thing to do is I think, and I feel probably empowering. And I think this is probably a lot of your work, Gareth, as well, empowering people to empower themselves and their awakening, taking self-responsibility, looking within, looking at the trauma, looking at their ancestral trauma and working on that so that we are free, freeing ourselves from our own predicament. I think that's important. But the question I want to ask you, Gareth, is, we talk about, the past sort of 4 or 5 years. I mean, where would you see, what would the modern future doctor look like? What would you like to see in the future? We're all talk about manifesting, and we are trying to manifest, that higher consciousness and that great awakening. What would you like to see in the future as a modern doctor in the world, as a global society?
What I would see is healthcare is based on the different levels that we experience disease: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. So let's say, and I know Jeremy has a very similar thought to this. So the hospital of the future would be primary care, where you've got people who deal with acute injury or issues, which is conventional medicine, right? Yeah. So let's say I break my leg. I'm not okay. I can take back flower remedies for the causation or energetic issue, but I'm going to go to A&E and get it fixed, right? So there's a place for conventional medicine within it, and there's a place for physical medicine and diagnostic medicine, and using those techniques for acute phases and emergencies. And so let's take the example. I break my leg, touch wood, I don't. So I break my leg, I go to A&E, I get my leg fixed physically. Then the way I would look at it was, right, okay, I'm going to reflect on what was the causation of that? What led me into that situation where I broke my leg? Is it something within me that I'm not addressing? Because I don't believe in coincidence. Let's get that straight. Things happen for a reason, right? So then I would look at what do I need to change in my life to move in a direction that's not traumatic. I may even look at which leg, is it right or left? Does it relate to my inner world or my outer world? Does it relate to me moving forward or being stuck? So I go more into the esoteric side, and then I might look at, what are the emotional things around this? Was I angry at the time? So I would see the future of healthcare would be acute phases, then the emotional, the mental, and a whole acceptance within all those aspects of healthcare that people are working together. So there's harmony between them. At the moment, we have, conventional, non-conventional, and they're fighting. And while they're fighting, one is deteriorating, the other one's growing, but it's not growing in balance. So let's say the whole industry of medical industry collapsed, and then you didn't have someone who could fix a leg, right? So there are aspects of conventional healthcare which are useful, but you have to start moving into the energetic place of where the causation is. And the causation is usually, for me, because I'm an energy worker, in the non-physical aspect of someone. So then you start to, you go on, Stephen.
No, just it just completely resonated with the energy side. It is something that we've in the quantum healing that we talk about as well. You know, like you said, Gareth, there is no coincidence. Everything that happens, even when you break a leg or you fall or you do something to your back or your shoulder, it is for a reason. And do you feel a lot of it comes from the emotional body? Because a lot of people, healers, talk about the mental, the different aspects of the bodies affecting the physical.
So
Just the mental and the spiritual.
When I teach people how to work on the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual side of someone energetically. And I'm not talking about the physical body at all. Right. So the idea is that, okay, people say, oh, I have a soul, right? I prefer to look at it, I'm a soul having a physical experience. So I'm a non-physical being that has an eternal soul that is having a physical experience on earth.
Yeah.
And the way I'm helped to experience that is through my spiritual makeup on earth, my mental makeup, and my emotional makeup on earth. So when I teach groups of people to become what I would term in the old sense of it, energy healers,
Yeah,
most of the work with people is done on the emotional and mental levels where there's blocks. Some of the work is done on causal, which is then moving into more karmic things of past lives and other life stuff, but it's not common thing, like you see things, people go on about karma, past lives, and they go on and on and on about it.
Yeah.
That stuff that comes up when it's meant to, you don't go delving for it. You work first with the emotional and the mental. And I think we mentioned before we started, you talking about spiritual bypass. And that's one of the reasons, I'll explain what I mean by that. That's one of the reasons when people don't address the emotional, mental aspect of an issue,
Yeah, it's a lot of it is avoidance, isn't it? A lot of it is spiritual avoidance. Me and Chris have faced that at the Purple Mountain a lot, haven't we? With people that go too deep with the karmic and the past life and the ancestral stuff. And really, what we try to say to people is to concentrate on this life, what's happening in the here and the now. Look at your upbringing, look at the mother and the father, the programming, the conditioning, the mental and the emotional state. And then people use the spiritual side as a way to really avoid, in a way, the trauma, avoid the emotional and avoid the mental state.
Well, you can understand why that is.
Why do you think people do that?
Painful. It's painful to look at the truth of what you are. So we all experience trauma in some shape or form. It's a traumatic world, right? There's trauma, and some people experience horrific trauma. Some people experience lighter traumas, but there's trauma in the world. And when you look at your trauma, it's painful because it might surface emotions of hurt, anger, and we're conditioned to say, don't get angry, don't do this, don't express yourself, don't feel anything, stay in the mental, in the intellectual part of the world, and you'll be fine. But reality isn't like that, because we are emotional beings. And what happens is that people, if they know unconsciously, if they've had trauma and they come into spiritual development, that's the thing that's going to lift out. And rather than do that, what can happen is people start to create an alternative identity, right? So let's say, for example, we talk about past lives, right? Let's say, for example, somebody goes and has a past life regression, And I'm not saying all that is bad. I'm sure some of it is good. But let's say somebody has a memory that they were something in a past life. Now, it's important to acknowledge that and bring that energy, not the identity, but bring the energy of that healing into this lifetime. So you integrate it. But what can happen is people bring the identity in.
Yeah.
And that's why you see people in the spiritual sense, they become these spiritual identities. And behind it, you know, if you challenge it, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of issues. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but it can be a problem, because what happens, that can only go on for so long, and then it collapses, and then people have to start again. So it's better to get into a pattern where you're progressively and gently and calmly working through issues. Like you say, start with this lifetime. Start with, how was I brought up? Were my parents? No, I don't think any parents is perfect, right? And they in themselves have their own traumas, and their traumas go on to their parents. It's a constant family trauma. So you get into, okay, I'm dealing with my own personal trauma, but it is connected to family trauma. Even if you work just through that, that's enough. Yeah, that's enough for many people to have a better lifestyle.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. It's a thought I've always had, that the most important life is the one you are living now, and
Yeah.
certainly not dismissing any looking into ancestral stuff or past lives as such. But I feel the same, that it can be a way of avoiding what is happening in the here and now, and what you're actually chosen to experience right here, right now.
Yeah.
And I found it, this subject for me, the spiritual bypassing, is very relevant at the moment. Myself and Stephen, we initially found ourselves, before creating the Purple Mountain, really through the spiritual movement, and very gradually we found a lot of work where the work truly lies is looking within, looking at yourself, knowing yourself, healing your trauma, and what you're experiencing, understanding what you're experiencing. But what we're witnessing, and this is certainly not in judgment for anybody who's listening, is that the spiritual movement as such is almost turning in on itself and becoming a block within itself. Like you say, sometimes avoiding through going too far into the spiritual side in a way, but also what I've found is people also contacting energies or asking for energies to be brought in that are very, very real. And they actually are not fully aware of these energies, what they can do. When you're saying, for example, we'll welcome anybody, you're going to get anybody. And we're witnessing a lot of this at the moment with people we speak to. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on it, Gareth.
All right. So I from a point of being in energy work for nearly 30 years, right? Another 3 years, it'll be 30 years. And I know that there's a spiritual awakening happening. There is a spiritual awakening happening where energies are changing and humanity is going through a big shift. Now, that doesn't mean that all energies on the energy planes are good. So if you look at the world, there are good people in it and there's bad people in there. And there's people in it who are so involuted, they are evil, right? You get the same on the energy planes. You get the same on the energy planes. And the thing with the energy planes is something can look good, but actually the energy behind it is not so good. And that is what I would term the astral plane, the lower astral plane. So if you look at the astral plane, it has a very low end, which is full of illusion and full of difficult energies. And then there's a higher end to the astral plane, which is highly beautiful and inspiring. And it's vast. And our understanding of energy work is still, in my book, in its infancy from an earthly viewpoint. So what happens is that if people don't work through the emotional and mental patterns that are within them, when they start to do energy work, they are possibly connecting to lower frequencies that appear better than they are. You know, there is actually, and I don't know how true this is, but it works for me. So people can use this if they want to. If I ever do energy work and I'm unsure about an energy, I will ask it 3 times, are you here for the highest good? And if you ask it 3 times, it has to answer you no if it's not. And the other trick I tend to do, because I'm very visual, is that if I see something, whatever it is, I'll look behind it and see what light it is behind it. If it doesn't feel right, I don't go there. It's the same as if you check a person out, right? If you're going into a partnership with a person, you check them out. I mean, and we're talking, a physical partnership is very different to an energetic partnership. Many people get caught up with energies that I'm sure are disruptive to their evolution and sidetrack them away from what I would call their own inner light. And I think what happens is that because those energies are so powerful, even if they stop, it's actually quite difficult to get back on track. You can do, but it's difficult to break down the illusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's for me, you mentioned it there, it's trusting your feelings. If it doesn't feel right, it most probably isn't. Because I've had even this feeling, or I might have had a visual of something that looks very pretty on the outside, and actually my gut feeling is, oh, that doesn't feel right. This actually, I feel a bit sickly. This isn't and it's reading energy, and really that's what we do with others in the physical as well. We meet people in our lives that straight away we feel like we've known them for years and years, and then we might meet other people and say, I don't know what it is about that person, but I just don't want to be around them.
It's your gut
And
feeling.
yeah, and that's, for me, that gut feeling is always there no matter what. It might be a little bit of a quieter voice, but it's there.
This also leads into, people are searching for gurus constantly, right? Your only guru you need is yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you work on your own life and you acquire wisdom from your own understanding yourself, that is far more valuable than reading 100 books on a subject. Now, don't get me wrong, you can get guidance from different places and pointers that are useful, that help you understand things. But if you step onto a path of self or inner development, do it for yourself, and do it in a way that you're learning about yourself, you're learning about your own healing process. Because if you can do that, then you can truly be a source of inspiration for others. If you go on a path that's constantly looking outside of yourself for spiritual answers, it just doesn't bring a happier, more fulfilled life, in my understanding of it. But people do. They go and see gurus, and they pay a lot of money for it, and then they follow, and then we're back into that thing of following rather than being in your own power and in your own truth. Because if you're truly in your own power and your own truth, nothing can shake you, because you can say no. Yeah,
I agree completely. It's and it's not that we can't gain, experiences or some wonderful teachings off other people, but for me, the greatest teacher that you'll ever had is the one inside.
yeah,
And I feel other people can help you to remember to bring you back to yourself a little bit to as we resonate with things, it can trigger. I feel it can trigger things in a positive way to come up. Well, all triggers are positive, really. Um,
yeah. I
to
understand.
say,
So it's like a catalyst, isn't it?
yeah,
You, you,
that's a better word.
you can be on the path, and you're a little bit stuck, and you think, where do I go for this? And I mean, I'm sure people listening will resonate with this. You think, come on, universe, give me some form of guidance here. I need it. And then something happens, or you meet someone, and you go, that's that, and then you're back on it. You're back on your journey. It's like a little
Yes,
guy, a little sort of signpost in a certain way. In a certain way.
100%, and it's like confirmations, and sometimes seeking too much confirmation isn't a good thing. But I feel the confirmations can come naturally all the time. You
Yeah,
get a little bit of a sign of you're right place, right time. You're in a certain place, and a certain piece of music comes on that you like. I call it the sweet spot, the
yeah.
undeniable. I don't care what anybody says. You can't explain that. That is happening, and I can feel it.
Well, it's
Um,
resonance, huh? It's
yeah,
resonance. We create a reality, so it's like then you go, okay, right, okay, I'm on the right tip here. This is good.
yeah, and it's a
And
good
it
feeling
is a
when that
sweet spot.
happens.
I like that. It is a sweet spot.
Yeah, that's what I'd call it. So I'm just going to go back to Stephen. I'm sure you got a few questions that you
Yeah.
want to ask. I know you're bubbling up.
No, just everything that we've all been talking about is great. It really resonates. I mean, the only thing sort of that comes to my mind, my thought is, if people are listening to this and they want to get into, to do that inner work, or they want to become a healer, is that everything, to keep it simple, everything is energy. Everything vibrates at a frequency. Just imagine, when we talk about tuning into lower or higher frequency, just imagine yourself being a radio station. You're tuning it. I've experienced that myself, but I know that I chose to experience that because in order for me to be the healer that I am, I had to learn about the negative, not just the positive, because everything is not just love and light. Because then you've got the other hand in the spiritual movement where people think everything is love and light. You need no protection. There is no dark, and that's quite scary in a way, that there are people out there that are teaching that. But everything vibrates at a frequency, and to really understand and master that is to experience. We're here to experience this physical world and to have these experiences. And I'm looking back now in my life, I'm very grateful that I've gone through the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it's made me the person I am. And I'm now those even those bad experiences aren't really bad. They have been very good for my journey. They have been good as part of my learning to be the healer that I am. So what's your thoughts on that, Gareth?
My thoughts on that would be that I mean, I'm of the belief that we work out our sort of life pattern before we enter into this realm. So we choose the parents we incarnate into, the society we incarnate into, and we are born into this realm probably carrying wounds from other lifetimes which relate to this lifetime.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of work on wounding, personally and with people, and healers. And it's not something that should be shied away from. It's important. The wound that we carry puts us in touch with our physical nature, our human nature. I mean, I'm no astrologer, So any astrologers listening, forgive me. But the wound is identified in astrology as being a product of Chiron, which is termed the wounded healer. So Chiron was a centaur, which is half man, half horse, which symbolically means, you know, you're put in touch with your animal nature to a certain degree through wounding, and that some of those difficult feelings that do come out are quite animalistic. You can't intellectualize about them; they're difficult.
Yeah,
You know, they are. And I
yeah,
think what happens is that people intellectualize them too much, rather than just expressing them, getting them out, finding ways of releasing, and going beyond it, going beyond the wound. And then what happens if you shift that energy, some of a higher nature of what you are comes in, and it integrates properly. So I think that wounding varies in people, but it's there as a teacher. So Chiron was a teacher. He taught Asclepius, you know, one of the gods of healing.
yeah.
He taught. So I like the mythology. There's meaning in it, you know. So he's the wounded healer. So wherever your wound is source to your greatest achievement, really, if you can heal it. See, that to me, you talked about medicine and healthcare. Wouldn't that be great to have, you know, find in your chart where your Chiron is, where your wounded is, and then you go, right, okay, I understand. But the problem is that people aren't brought that more esoteric meaning is prevented from being out there more for people. So let's say somebody goes into the conventional sense of healing emotional mental difficulties. And I'm not saying this is right for everyone because it's so varied. But I know from my point of view, when I was going through real difficulties in my emotional mental healing, as soon as I saw where my Chiron lay in my chart, I was like, oh, it makes sense. And it's bringing meaning to that suffering that is empowering. It's when you don't have meaning to what your suffering is, that's when it's really difficult. It's almost like you're out at sea and you've got the mast there, but you don't know how to pull it up so that you can sail safely, you know, to the shore. But that little bit of knowledge directs you in a certain direction.
It frees you, doesn't it? It frees you, I think, and that was one of my awakening, and Chris's as well, that it freed us from, you know, the victim sort of perspective of as an individual, that actually everything that's happening is happening for my purpose, and that I am but a mirror. We are but mirrors to the universe. You talk about this reality, and that actually all my suffering's been created by me, which then really I can either feel sorry for myself or I can pull my socks up and say, well, if I've created the suffering, I can also create the healing. And that actually it's not about, and this is another thing about bypassing, I think, that a lot of people think, and that's where people get into plant medicine work, that they think it's all about getting rid of your trauma. And it's actually not. It's part of who you are. You just talked about the integration. And I think I don't know what your thoughts on this is. Where do people get lost between the wound and the trauma and integrating that? Because it's not about letting go. It's about, you know, understanding, bringing clarity. So where is the disconnect with people on that teaching? If I sort of put that question right.
Well, I mean, okay, most children grow up, and you know, I saw it recently, and I mean, look, I'm a parent, and I know how frustrating it is to you know, caring for your kids, right? There's good times, there's bad times, there's indifferent times. It's just the way things are. But I was watching a parent. There was a child who was obviously upset by something, and they were crying their eyes out. Natural, right? If you're unhappy, cry. But the parents say, "Don't cry. Stop crying." Yeah. So you get this, and this can be this can be a conscious thing, or you can even have good intent, like think, okay, my parents told me not to cry, right? This is an example. So say my parents say, "Don't cry." Then I grew up and I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to let my kids cry, right? But if I haven't worked on the unconscious part of it, and it's just an intellectual concept, I still pass on that pattern unconsciously. And that's what the difficulty is. People touch on it consciously, but they don't touch on the unconscious pattern or the pattern on a deeper level. So it doesn't really change it. And I think that's where people get stuck. They get stuck in the intellectualization of development.
Is that the mind again? Do you find
just thought?
The mind?
So it's thought. So if I go, okay, I'm going to learn about family trauma, and I buy the best book on family trauma, right? And it's the best book for the intellectual side of family trauma, the research, what happens, how to address it conventionally. So you intellectualize everything, and you never sit with something, right? So I know if you start to watch yourself, and it's getting into this habit of just looking, right? And that's another issue, is that people, they don't just look at themselves without judgment. They'll go, oh, somebody actually, this is really interesting. Somebody recently said to me, I said, oh, does everyone, meditate here? And they, everyone said yes. And somebody said, I find it difficult. I said, why? Because I can't stop thinking, right? I said, yeah, but meditation is not about stopping thinking. And that's why we've moved into this place where people think mindfulness is stop thinking.
Yeah.
And don't think. It's not. It's just look at your thoughts, watch them.
Yeah.
Allow them to arise, whether they're painful or not, and just look at them and allow them to arise and go. And then what happens is that you start to understand the process of thinking and the nature of attaching your energy to the thought, and either making it bigger or repressing it or just letting it be, And I think that's where people get stuck a lot. They're in an intellectual concept of development rather than sitting and saying, okay, well, what do I feel? What do I really feel uncomfortable about? And you were talking earlier about mirroring. So if I go out into the world and something happens around me, and say it's somebody who is, confronts me in some way, rather than me going, oh, that person, I'll say to myself, why is that in my life? What's the mirror here?
Yeah.
What do I need to look at, and how do I see that I'm creating my reality around me constantly? But you talked about this, Stephen, and it's called spiritual. For me, it's called spiritual maturity. It's being mature to say, you know what? It's not everything outside of myself. So I'm not going to project everything out onto someone else and say it's their fault. I create my reality, whether it's painful or not. I create it. And the wounding that I have, you could go even deeper and say that on some level, maybe there's causation there in cause and effect. And again, people misunderstand what that is. Yeah. They see it as a punishment thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's not. It's just the fact that you do something, it creates an effect. and if you do a good thing, it creates a good effect. If you do a bad thing, it creates that vibrational effect back. So it's not like you bad, me good. It's like just a law, a universal law of cause and effect. But it's spiritual maturity, and I'm not sure how many people in, you know, the spiritual development sort of community have the ability to do that. I don't know, and I'm not saying it's bad. Look, I remember when I first started out, right? The glamour of things is very appealing, you know. It's very appealing.
I was going to say there, Chris. Sorry, I know you've got a question there. Is that, and I'm sorry, I'm really passionate about this subject myself, Gareth.
I can see you're biting at the bit.
I know. And the thing is, and I've come to learn this myself. People romanticize, you know, oh, we're going to be spiritual, you know, and so actually some of the most loving people that I've met on my journey have not been in the spiritual movement, are the one who's emptying the bin, who's the caretaker, you know, who've reincarnated to live that simple spiritual life. And actually what really humbled me, Gareth, is in one of my ceremonies, some of my inner work that I did was actually one of the reasons I've come back to do the spiritual work was actually to repay off some karma and psychic debt. And that really humbled me, because part of my ego thought, oh, I'm spiritual and I'm a medium and I'm this and I'm great and I'm up here. And actually that sliced my ego in half to say that really humbled me. That was part of my, you know, people romanticize the awakening. Sometimes the awakening is, you know, slicing your ego in half and actually really humbling you, showing you deep gratitude for your life. So, you know, people might listen to this and, oh, you know, everything's great. And it's not, you know, it's
look,
big, powerful self-realizations.
The best lessons are the difficult ones.
Yeah.
They are. They teach you the most. And, you know, it's like, there are lots of people who, and I've taught for 20 years. So some people enter into development in that state of everything's wonderful, everything's love, everything's light. It's all, there's no darkness, there's no negativity, there's nothing like that, right? And if they can follow practices that they follow, and the bottom line for me is, okay, do what you want, but is it creating more happiness for you? Is it creating more stillness in your mind? Is it creating more fulfillment? Is it creating more empowerment? Do you feel more comfortable in your body? You know, do you feel there's meaning behind everything? And lots of people I've met who've been on that road initially, if they really are honest, they will say that they're still unhappy with things. You know, but unfortunately, it's very easy to become, you know, caught up in a group where there's a central figure who controls everything, if they're powerful enough, you know, which is in the old term would be called a cult. You know, it's not difficult to do that.
Yeah, I think that's what that's certainly, it can't be denied that that's there. You know, that as we try to discover more about ourselves and do this work on the outer, there is always that will magnify that side and really prefer that we stay in ignorance, really, because then we're kind of more susceptible to follow on with things. But I love this subject that we're on now, and I've even experienced it looking back, and I love that term, spiritual maturity.
Yeah,
I think I think that
I mean,
is
I spent a lot of time blaming, right? Victim, victim, victim,
Yeah.
victim, victim. Blame, blame, blame. And then I remember that I going through a very, very deep change. And I just remember just this thought of, this is my fault. I have a choice
Yeah.
whether I allow myself to be like this or not.
Yeah.
You know, and that
Yeah.
if you look, 100 people could tell me that, right? This is the difference we're talking about. 100 people could tell me that, oh, you're a victim, you need to change. But unless I really feel it and embody it, I'm not going to change.
And you got to experience it as well. Like you said, with everything that happens around us, the people we meet. I went through a period of time where I was really undervaluing myself. So
Yeah,
I met a lot of people that undervalued me. And
yeah,
it's so easy to look at why are these people doing this to me, but actually what it was showing me what was going on inside, saying you're undervaluing yourself, and you do some work on that, and you're going to find things change very quickly around you. But I did want to touch on a little bit what Stephen said as well, and you talked about it, Gareth. This almost this pressure people do put on them. I mean, when I got into this work, I was I kind of had this thought that get to this point where I'm just totally zen and nothing would bother me. But it isn't reality. It's not reality, you know. I very quickly learned it just doesn't happen that way. There's new things coming all the time, and I call it now. Once I've figured out, which I feel I had a sweet spot moment the last 12 months where I was like, I know why I'm doing this work now. It's because I've got the inner work I need to do. This role that I've got in my life and in the center that we run is going to help me to do that work as well. And I feel this is an important part of any, if we want to call them anybody who facilitates or teaches, is that we are doing the work as well at the same time because we're fulfilling that role. But I also feel it takes the pressure off you. I get it. I'm aware of it. And I see this going on a lot
mm,
with a lot of people saying, well, if I do this, I'm going to be more spiritual. If I, for example, I see people pressuring themselves into unnatural lifestyle changes, things they don't want to do because they will feel they'll be highly evolved for doing it. I feel that's going on a lot with the plant medicine movement that the plant the plant-based
yeah,
diet movement
yeah,
at the moment is that of course you want to do that, absolutely fine. If it works for you, great, you know, it's none of my business. But what I am seeing is people who find themselves in states of unhappiness
yeah,
because actually they're doing something because they think it's right, not because they feel it's right for the body.
yeah.
And I think that's just leading on from what you said of asking yourselves, am I really happy? Does this really work for me? Or is it just something I've read?
Yeah. Yeah, but we live in that society now, don't we? Where, the progressive society is, um, be good even though you don't feel it, right? Be, love everything even though you don't feel like that. Pretend to be peaceful. Pretend, to follow the line because, um, you know, the people who run society know best. So, the conditioning is a lot deeper than people realize, I think. And I think also for me, the idea that all your thoughts and your emotions, are stuck in your head, is a bit insane, and it doesn't describe things. If you start to think about you have your mind or your brain is connected to consciousness, which is a stream of energy around you and runs through everything, then it makes sense more. Because then you can see how so many people think a certain way. It holds everything into that pattern. And I think that when people start to move into the understanding that, your thoughts and emotions are a vibration and an energy, then they already are. They are definitely. I mean, if I look at how many people were into this work 25 years ago. There were people into it. I mean, there's a two-sided coin here. There were people into it, there were less, but the people who were into it were very serious.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened over that period of time, it's become trendy. Yeah. Trendy to do mindfulness, trendy to do spiritual development.
Yeah.
Trendy. So rather than not be trendy, I'm going to go and do a spiritual development class, and then it's almost a bit like and it's good in all religion, don't get me wrong, but it's almost a bit like, go and beat the crap out of someone, then go to church and go to confession and tell someone you've forgiven.
Yeah, I used to say that and it can happen in all walks of life. This of, like you said, do what we want throughout the week, as long as we go to wherever on a Sunday and have our little moment. And it's what we do outside of that. Even in some of the mediumistic work myself and Stephen do. A lady we met many years ago said, when you're demonstrating anything, you should be the same person you are up there as you are here when you're talking to people or you're with your friends. It should be the same, not another persona.
But do you not think a lot of it now, it probably might lead on to the next question for you, Gareth, is the importance of being authentic? Do you see a lot of that happening? And of course, when we're not coming from a place of judgment, and we have no right to judge anybody, but there does seem to be a lot of that authenticity now in the spiritual movement. And why do you think that is?
I think that some of that is just poor development. I mean, my teacher, right? She passed last year, and she taught me, and she was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it's interesting. She trained as a medium when she started, right? And she had a serious teacher who was like, "Look, this is serious work. If you don't take it seriously, you better leave now." And they went through every single thing of grounding, protection, linking, finding out whether the energy's right or not, is the message right, your own development, energetic cleanliness in terms of keeping your energy clear. And that was passed on to me, that seriousness, And I think that what's happened is that it's become popular. And then what happens is somebody goes and does a short course and they think they know it because their ego wants it to be special, yeah? And it's interesting, we talk about wounding. Many people drawn into spiritual work or healing work are deeply wounded. They wouldn't do it otherwise, right? They're deeply wounded, and rather than say there is something within my sense of self, my own identity, that is not quite right. It's this idea of, right, my ego, this makes me feel more special. And then what happens is they go and do minimum training. They don't really know what they're doing, but then they go and teach someone else. And then that person carries on the same problem. And before you know it, you have a dilution of the art, right? Whether it's a healing art, psychic, mediumship, channeling, whatever, right? It's serious. It's serious work. But what happens is people get this it gets diluted. And then somebody is down at the end of the dilution. They think that they're doing something that's special. And I mean, I've been at shows, right? I remember, bless her, Henriette Mastijk, the name was a brilliant teacher, right? We used to sit at shows like a holistic show, and we'd be sitting and looking at other healing stands, and she turned around. Can you see any energy there? And I said, no, there's nothing. And the person is going through this process, like if they're channeling energy, and there's no energy at all. So they're not feeling any energy. They've been taught a technique, but there's no involvement energetically. And I'm sure that happens with mediumship and psychic work, right?
Definitely.
Because I've been to shows and I go, oh, I'll go and have a reading, right? And I'll sit down and I go, there's no energy in this.
So true.
Right? You know what? Can I tell a funny story?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
This was at a show, and this person went for a reading, and this lady sort of came up. She's quite overweight with a friend who was quite. She obviously was like looking for an answer to something. She looked unhappy. There's a funny side to this and not, right? So the guy said, "Can I have your ring from your finger?" Right? And he put the ring on his face here. He went, like this. Took it here. Went, Like he took easily 2 minutes to do this. And then he turned to her, he says, "You've had this ring for 20 years, haven't you?" And she just turned around and said, "No." I was like, and I just thought, for one, I wanted to laugh my head off because he was totally wrong. And the glamour of it all, the showmanship. Obviously he was trying to draw into this, like, this thing of I am wonderful at what I do, for her to say yes and lead her down this path. But she didn't. She said no, right? And then he started to backtrack. Now, there's a funny side to that for me, because I can see that, you know, he's been called out. But there's a sad side because that person sat down and paid money for it.
Yeah.
And
Do you think there's a bit
spiritual counseling with that person, right? For me, that's karmically bad. That you talk about karma, cause and effect, creating cause and effect in a spiritual sense. I think that holds very heavy karma.
There's a lot of that in the movement. You know, me and Chris were just talking about this in our circle last week, the dilution of the basic sort of teachings that are the pioneers and our ancestors were upheld to. And now a lot of people are paying the consequences. You're talking about the karma. People are living by the karma now because there is such low. And, you know, me and Chris talk about it, and I openly say, you know, we've been involved in the mediumistic movement for a long time.
Yeah.
And I said, they're not working with spirit. They've not got spirit with them. And there's part of you thinks, oh, you feel bad for saying that. Then there's other mediums who's got an amazing link. So that's why I never judge mediums. I'll say some mediums are stronger than others.
Yeah.
And it depends on their inner work that they've done or their connection with spirit. But also I find that with Reiki as well. I find the Reiki movement such in dilution, and the consequences are now, aren't they? You know, you could be a practitioner in a weekend, and you know, I'm sure that the founders of these practices, it took years. I mean, you know, the old mystery schools, you know, the old Egyptian mystery schools, it was 12 years, 15 years.
I met a practitioner. This was quite a while ago, like 20 years ago, and they were pranic healers, and they'd done like a Reiki training, and they said they weren't given symbols till after about 5 years.
Wow.
Now, you know, that's very different to going from the tumor on a weekend. That's it. See, the issue is this: if you're doing any energy work, whether you're like a healer, a medium, you have to learn to ground. You've got to know how to ground. You've got to know how to protect your energy field. You've got to know how to link. If you are a medium, you link in a slightly different way to a healer, I think, depending on whether you're talking to spirit or not. it comes in through a different place. And that guidance comes in through a slightly different place. People aren't taught the basics like grounding, protection, clearing, linking, being aware, is an energy okay or not? And we talked earlier about ordinary people living life and being spiritual. People who live in all, when you say ordinary life, it's not ordinary in the sense of it's lesser than something, but people who aren't into energy work, right? They can be far more spiritual than people in it.
Yeah, spot on.
They just live in it, they just live in a life, and they're decent people. They make decent decisions. They think, about their fellow human being in a similar way, and they live a good life. That's spiritual for me. This is the problem. We get this term spiritual, and everyone takes it as being, I don't know, Christ-like or God-like or
They think they're
Buddha-like.
superior. They think
Totally.
they're superior, don't they? A lot of people, this superiority complex.
I mean, what we see a lot of as well, Gareth, is and you spoke on it a few minutes ago. There is replication. So actually seeing somebody do something and I want to do that, so I'm just going to do it, but I'm going to do it the exact same way. And for me, just totally loses its authenticity. You are just replicating. You're going through the motions. You're not doing what you feel. Where I feel we learn an art, or we're taught, and then we sort of make it our own with those that are working with us as well. We home in on it and do it in a way that is unique to us. I mean, we were very fortunate, myself and Stephen. We were brought into this work through a home circle, and
Right.
like you said, those teachings were straight away protection, grounding, know your energy, know who you're working with. And we didn't actually do anything with anybody publicly or one-to-one outside of that circle for about 8 years.
Yeah.
We were just sat in that circle learning about ourselves, learning about spirit.
That's a decent training. 8 years is a decent training.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. With the healing course I run, it's a minimum of 2 years, and people get to a point where they can work safely and effectively, right?
Yeah.
If people want to go much deeper into it, it's a further 3 years. So it's a 5-year training program. And then if people want to teach, it's an extra training. So it's similar, like you're talking a similar amount of time to get to a point where because a good teacher doesn't want their students to be like them. It wants those students to be in a safe, energetic environment. It wants the teacher has to be aware of energy to the extent where he can see whether someone is energetically okay or not, and guide them into understanding how they can bring their innate ability out. Because this is what I don't understand with Reiki is, how can you attune someone to something and all the same energy? Your attunement is your attunement to your higher self, your attunement to your soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it. It's yours. No one should be telling you where or how to attune in terms of what energy. It's so personal and so individual, and that's why really good energy workers, whatever field you're in, whether it's healing, psychic work, mediumship, if you're truly in your energy, you attract the right people. They come to you, because they're probably communicating with you already on a non-physical level. And then they come to you and you go, okay, I recognize this person or this energy, But that was common. You see, that, so to speak, was common back in the day. It was common. That's how people used to speak.
You hear that everywhere, and you hear, whether it's a healing, whether, any form of this work, we hear it off so many people we speak to on this podcast, where they've had this really authentic teachings, or somebody that they came across on their journey, and they've taken the time, and we're seeing it more and more of this very quick and fast approach
Yeah.
to things that just doesn't give you the time to
See, I
know who you are.
yeah, but also I always think this as well. You know, we are in a battle between light and dark, definitely, right? And there's nothing more that the other side would want than to push the healing movement in a negative direction,
Yeah.
right? Now, however much you have in the light energies that are pro evolution and pro help, you can guarantee there's ones who are fighting for the opposite, right? Now they're not going to come in and go, "Oh, we're the other side. We're going to lead you astray." They're not. They're going to appear to be the good ones, like people
Yeah.
doing in the planet. On the planet, they appear to be this good force, but they're not really. When you look deeper behind what they are, you see it. You know, and it's
Yeah.
the
You
same.
learn,
It's that old thing: as above, so below. It's mirrored.
yeah.
You know.
You learn so much, though. It's something that it was another part of my awakening. Is is the importance of observing. Is
Yeah.
actually you learn so much by just taking a step back, observe and watch, and people reveal themselves, and you read people's energies. Don't read what people say, but read how people act, read
Yeah.
people's energies. And that's something that I've come to learn. And I think the big thing, from my opinion, that there is not enough people asking questions. And this is our thing during COVID. We didn't take a stance on either, though I had my opinions, on a negative way, of control and so forth, is having the ability to ask questions, to question things, self-inquiry. I think this is so important for people. Stop. Don't just believe, the power of belief. Stop, observe what is happening, read the energies, ask questions. For me, people don't ask enough. People don't, we are intelligent beings. We are higher beings. We're here to co-create. We're here to manifest. Ask questions. I think that's part of moving away from that three-dimensional intellect, that perspective, and want to break free. I don't know what your thoughts on the observing side is, Gareth.
I agree that we're at a time of great change, and when COVID happened, right, I remember speaking to lots of colleagues in the energy world, and it was almost like there was a split in consciousness, that human consciousness was just bubbling away. There's a few people wanted to move and evolve in a certain direction. Then this thing happened, and people went up in a vibration and people went down in a vibration. There was a split, and I think it's still there. And people who are wanting to evolve and move forward, they're trying to pull other people up with it, and they are slowly. But I think there's this conscious movement where there's a widening of vibrational difference. And unfortunately, I mean, people who've been affected by what's happened, I don't think we see all of it. I mean, the amount of emotional and mental suffering is probably far more, apart from the physical stuff that's going on, like deaths and injuries and stuff like this. On emotional levels and mental levels, people have been wounded. And again, if you look at it from a light dark sort of fight, what better way to keep humanity down than to wound it constantly?
Yeah.
And lower the vibration.
Yeah.
And then, you can get into the argument that when you lower the vibration of humanity, souls with a darker sort of vibration to them can incarnate because the vibration is right for them. The despots, the controllers, the people who commit, really bad crimes. So if you lower the vibration as a whole, then those energies can incarnate into that because the vibration's right. But if people lift it and the vibration becomes higher, there's no reason why we shouldn't, every human being shouldn't be having a good life on this planet.
Yeah.
A happy, fulfilled, good life. It's beautiful when you really look at it. When you really go out and you sit and you look at nature, and it's just amazing, huh? But again, we can't, put in a compartment, and we do. You put it into, there's a tree, there's this, there's that, rather than just sitting in the energy behind it, right? When you tune into the energy behind things, you can't describe it with words. I'm sure you've had that, where you've had experiences where you think, how do I? No, I can't describe it. As soon as I describe it and put it into words, it loses something.
Yeah, I feel it's something that certainly not denying. I feel it's had a tremendous emotional and mental effect on people, and that's what we're seeing, where the healing is needed, and a lot of this work is needed now. But also on the more positive aspect of lockdowns, for example, and things like that, I feel a lot of people got to appreciate their environment a lot more.
Yeah.
And going back to the simplicity, we live 5 minutes here from the beach, very fortunate. And that beach was very, very busy a lot of times. And I feel like there was a lot of people probably going there that haven't been in a long time, and going to nature reserves, parks, taking a walk and thinking, wow, this is great. And and
why aren't we doing this more often?
all the time? And not only that, but after going, saying, wow, I feel really great. All that stuff in my head is gone.
There is another side to it that is, the light has shown up exactly where the darkness is in humanity. It's become more obvious that, it's been exposed to what it is. And like anything, it's a shadow. It's our shadow. It's a collective shadow. We all have the ability to kill someone if the circumstances are right. So if somebody harmed someone you love, within a split second, you could kill someone easily. Now, do you do it? No, you don't. But everyone has that potential. But I think what happened during that period is it became very obvious. We are going about our business in a very automaton way, and we need to maybe connect back to nature, because as soon as we do that, we connect back to ourselves. Because that's what we are. We've separated ourselves so much from nature.
I agree, and it's something I'd say at the minute, when you talk about things coming to the surface, the avoidable has become unavoidable. It's there, inside of us, outside of us. It's there, and just as we sort of draw this interview to a close, I cannot believe how fast it's gone.
How long have we been doing it?
We're coming up to about an hour and a half.
Wow, that's great. I've enjoyed it.
We've only touched the surface, haven't we?
Yeah,
I know. It's good though, huh?
Very good.
But just what I want to close up with is obviously the name of our podcast, Collective Awakening, and we're sort of naturally flowing towards this, Gareth, of what do you feel with the current the place we're in the world right now, of where we're headed, even for example, in terms of our healthcare, what's going on around us, within us? Where do you think things are headed? It's, any way we look at it, it's a very auspicious time on the earth. I'll often say many people reincarnated because a lot of us just couldn't resist the opportunity to be here on such a time when so much is happening.
I like that. That's a really nice phrase, that. I think that we're going through a very big shift in consciousness, and I think it's going to end up really positive. I think we're seeing the degradation of many old systems that aren't functional anymore, not just the medical system. And I can see a lot more community stuff going on. That's great. You know, it's like a rebirthing of community within humanity.
Yeah.
I still think there'll be a few hurdles from those who hold on to very old systems, those in power or apparent power, you know, the illusion of power. And I think that will maybe intensify a little bit. But I know from my friends who are in, you know, astrology circles that will start to change dramatically over the latter part of next year for the positive. So I mean I think it's all positive from an energy worker's point of view, because I have to go with what energies I tune into, and it's increasingly more light, it's increasingly more deep, and it's increasingly more profound. But on the other side of it, it's anchoring that into physical reality. We have to anchor that into a physical reality, because there's no point in living in the spiritual realm if you can't anchor those energies into humanity, because that's where we're living, like you said earlier. But I feel positive. I mean, you know, we're on a podcast talking about stuff that people never used to talk about, really, you know.
Yeah, and it's amazing to be able to connect this way. I mean, we started this podcast in 2020. We're carrying on connecting with people, and you know, there are certain aspects of technology that, you know, everything has its positives and its negatives. And to me, the positive side of technology is we can connect with people in different locations around the world and have these kind of discussions, and, you know, share that knowledge and get it out there. You know, that's one of our, and I actually feel like I feel the same. I feel, you know, it's not going to be a walk in the park, but we're going in the right direction. And that's, you know, and there are going to be those energies that don't want it going in that direction, but got to keep going, doing that inner work. It's
gonna happen. It's gonna happen no matter what. That
you know what I think? It's
Yeah.
already happened on the energy planes. All we have to do is think it and bring it into being.
Absolutely.
It's there already. That pattern is there. Just know it and bring it into reality. It's already happened, right? But we have, you know, you don't have something for nothing, eh? You have to work it.
Yeah. So Gareth, it's been really great speaking with you. Such an interesting and passion-driven conversation here. I can feel it. I've got warmer and warmer during the course of this conversation, and the time's passed so quick. For anybody that's interested in Gareth's work, we will be placing links below wherever you're listening or watching this video, that if you feel you want to contact him or know a little bit more, that you'll be able to do that. So Gareth, I wanted to say a huge thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Like-minded people. It's been lovely.
And this is what it's about. I just loved it. And for me, this is how you should feel when you connect in this way, because I feel totally energized now. I've got quite a little some tasks to get on with today, and I feel like I'm just leaping into them now. I'm ready. Yeah, so it's been amazing. So thanks so much, and thank you to everybody who's watching and also listening. Please continue to support this podcast, and if you feel you want to have your say as well, comment on some of the things we've discussed. This is a sharing platform in that way. So until we speak again, we're going to say goodbye to everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.